Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Rough Rider, where every week we talk writing, self-publishing, and making it as an author. We'll eventually have a name for this series of author interviews. Might as well just be Rough Riders, probably plural, but we'll see. So today I have Mikel Melwasul back. He was on about a week ago with me. As of the time of us recording this, that video is not out yet, but it will be soon. So you will see him twice, but we brought in a third person today. This is David Tullius, who co-authored a novel with Mick. So I'm very excited to have co-authors on here because we haven't done this before. So how are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Yeah, I'm doing great. If I knew it was a Rough Rider themed podcast, I would have worn my cavalry hat. But better luck next time.
I've had an
I
idea.
need it to be more clearly Teddy themed.
I had
you have an idea. Okay, what's that?
So Rough Writer. The Rough Writer podcast.
The Rough
Just
Writer
change
podcast.
the writing. Writer,
Yeah.
W-R-I-T-E-R.
Yeah. I just, you know what? I have this photo of Teddy behind me. It was just because I love this picture. My friend gave this to me in college, and I always had it on my desk when I was writing papers and stuff, and I felt like he was like challenging me to succeed or something because he just has this look on his face. But I feel like it's not very clear that all of this is like, that it has like a Teddy theme behind it. So I need it to be a little bit more upfront. But
yeah, there's worse people to be enamored with and compelled to work harder by.
He's just a badass. Like,
yeah, it's a great story.
Yeah. So in the last interview that I did with Mick, we did talk about your book, Paragon Exordium, which I stand by my opinion that is a really kick-ass name. There it is. And wow, it's huge. I don't remember if you held it up in the video in the last one. If you did, I didn't notice. And yeah, that's a big book. And it's a beautiful book. Yes, you can use someone with it. So I want to talk a little bit about that just in case people don't see the previous video, just so that way they can get a little bit of an idea of what Paragon Exordium is all about. I know what it is, but either of you want to go into kind of the background? I'll tell everyone it is fantasy. So I know fantasy is popular here, so this will appeal to some people for sure. But tell me a little bit about Paragon Exordium for those viewers who didn't watch the previous interview.
I want Dave to do it so that if it's different, people who watched the first one will see some differences, or if it's the exact same pitch.
The problem with that, Mick, is that you've done a lot of these by yourself and you say different stuff every time. So I can't possibly be correct. Okay. So what I have been telling people, right, especially in my job where they are interested in seeing a big, heavy fantasy book on my desk and are asking me questions about it, is that it is a fantasy. It is technically urban fantasy because it mixes modern and fantastical elements. It is a story about normal modern times, and they experienced an apocalypse, except this apocalypse is magical in nature, and all at once modern people have to contend with all of the wills and wiles of a magical society, and it's catastrophic for people, environmentally as well as societally. And it's the story of a small town that ends up on the right side of being prepared, trying to just make it through the opening stages of the end of the world.
Cool. So I had talked with Mick about how it was based in Georgia and how you're writing about kind of like some real world places or inspired by real world places, which I always think, I know there were comparisons between your book and The Walking Dead, which I feel like the Georgia thing just kind of immediately brings that up for some people. Are you in Georgia too, or are you somewhere else?
No, I am currently in Austin, Texas, although I lived in Georgia for about 6 years, Savannah, in Statesboro, and at Fort Benning, now Fort Moore, in Columbus, Georgia.
Cool. So when you were writing this together, were you both living in the same place, or the same state, or you were doing all of this remotely?
Started it at the same place, but most of it has been separate. I'm still active duty military, and I have
Oh, nice.
moved a ton of times in the last 8 years. Been to dozens of countries officially and not, travel. And so all of this has been remote almost, and some of it was time zones that were not conducive to doing that. So those were fun. But I do tell people when we talk about this that people ask me a similar question about why how that works. And what I generally say is, since I've moved so much and experienced a bunch of different things, this is one thing that's been constant, and so it helps me very much to center myself. I could be in whatever place, and this is a regular, almost weekly, discussion that we have about something we're passionate about, and so that's been very grounding, especially when I'm kind of far afield. So,
yeah, well, that's great. And let me say thank you for your service. What branch are you in?
I'm in the Army, and
nice.
I am separating from the Army on purpose.
Okay.
On purpose.
So no
later on in the year. So
you didn't go AWOL or anything.
No,
like that?
No, because when I say I'm separating, everyone gives me the same look, like I've done some horrible crime. No, I fulfilled my service obligation. I'm looking for different opportunities. I want to get more education, and it feels like the right time for me to do that. I don't regret doing it. And I've been to a bunch of places. I've met tons of interesting people, both American and not. And it's been overall mostly a pretty great experience. But it's just sort of my time to move on and work on something else. So I'm happy.
Yeah,
so.
my fiance is in the Navy, but he just got out. So he's been there for like 17 years. So it was time. So I think he's a little bit relieved. He switched over to the reserves for a while, and then
there you go. Well, sometimes they make the reservists work, so
they do. I didn't realize that. I thought you were just like on standby and didn't have to do anything, but apparently you have to like go in and drill and do all this stuff. So I had no idea. But
if you're gung ho, in the reserves, you can find yourself on more deployments. And for I don't know if it's called a deployment for the Navy, but just shipborne, whatever. Like, if you want that when you're in the reserves, you can spend more time cruising around than active duty sailors can. So
But like just being with someone who is in the military and knowing kind of what it's, I mean, I don't know firsthand what it's like to be in, but I can imagine that having something like this, like a creative outlet, would be really helpful when you can just be in, a generally stressful situation.
Oh yeah, and it's been great for that. So
so I know that like I co-authored my sci-fi novel with my best friend. And it was a good experience overall. And we had our differences occasionally, but I remember always having those like regular phone calls where we'd be on the phone for like 4 hours at a time. And I always just had so much fun with it. So, like the two of you doing that together, I feel like that's such a good, like, it's both like a good creative exercise and just like a friendship exercise.
That's a great way to put it into words. I haven't actually that's a great way to do it, because this isn't just a professional thing, right? Obviously we're friends and spend time doing other things digitally mostly because of the separation, but it's not just this, but it does. I mean, this is a lot. So
so tell me how the two of you got started with this. I mean, I know because I talked to Vic about it, but for those people who haven't heard,
I'm gonna make Mick say it again, and then you fact check him later. So you said the same thing.
Reference the video.
I'm taking notes.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Well, when I decided to write the book, I decided to sit down and actually take this idea I'd had for 10 years almost. I wrote the first act by hand. And so I got the first act written up. I typed it up, made some changes there. And I was like, okay, so I've got like the first chunk of this, of what I want to do. I've got some characters and stuff. And I really wanted to bring in another perspective that had like a military experience, military eyes, to make sure that the military elements of the story weren't cringy or awful or unrealistic and stuff. So Dave was one of my best friends from college. He was an English major, so I knew he knew what he's talking about in terms of literature too. So I just reached out. I'm like, hey man, can you read the first act of this book I'm working on that I've probably told you about it before, because I tell everyone about it because I've been planning it for years and years, and just give me some feedback and stuff. And so that's just how it started. And so he looked through that and we discussed a lot of stuff. And then we're like, okay, well, that took 4 or 5 hours. Let's talk next weekend and take some more time and go over some more of this. And that just kept happening. And it happened for 8 years.
It's a long time.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that was it. That's all.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, I have said it. I said it in one of my very few TikTok videos because I am not a fan of the platform, and Mick dragged me kicking and screaming over there. I just want to be clear to anybody who is military adjacent or military that's thinks that, like, when he asked me to do that, I was like a brand new first, second lieutenant in the Army. So I had no real Army experience. And I was just being a cadet. So he's like, let's get the military expert. And I'm like, ooh, I guess I can pretend to be that for a little bit. So just in case there's like, you're like, wow, this isn't really, first of all, when I said then I'll say the same thing. Like, everybody's military experience is different. Say you could be the same, almost to a T, same job, same branch, same whatever, and have totally different experiences. Mine is different than what other people's was. And so if I'm sorry if you think that I made a mistake or, that it wasn't really truly that, like, that's what it was for me. Yeah. Right. And it's not the same. It's not a monolith.
A cadet even has more knowledge than an average person who has no experience with the military whatsoever would have. So like, that's still helpful. And I know that I think I mentioned this when I was talking to Mick last time, that anytime Brian, my fiance, watches a military movie and there's some glaring error, like the uniform is the wrong one, like he's like, that's an Army uniform, this is the Air Force, or like he flips out and he's just so horrified by it. And I keep telling him, like, you need to be like a consultant for movies or something. And apparently the most accurate military movie he's ever seen is actually Battleship, the one with Rihanna.
Okay, he's a Navy guy. That makes
like, yeah, there was almost nothing wrong with it. Like, wow,
except for the aliens, right?
The aliens, yeah. I was asking him recently if they ever had him involved in like a UFO crash retrieval, if he would tell me, and he said no. And I was disappointed. He was like, why would they ask me to do that anyway? I'm like, I don't know what Crash would see. But yeah, so you two had a good experience with co-authoring. So I would like to ask you, kind of, were there ever any points where there were kind of creative differences? And I know that it wouldn't have been like an angry, like, how, like, like, why do you think that's a good idea? It's a terrible idea. But like, I'm sure when you have two individual people working together, that's not always going to be on the same page about everything. So were there any like times where that came up, and then kind of how did you work through that? Like, how did you get over that?
Oh God, there were no times.
There were no times. Okay.
There was. Hold on. Well, there's actually a fairly recent example in book 2. I suggested, we're in our second draft of book 2, and I suggested us adding a group of orcs to the story, and just adding like a side plot kind of thing with this group of orcs who I wanted to really be very invested, like a big part of the story, and really branch out some characters and some experiences and stuff. And I don't think you were a huge fan of the idea originally, Dave.
Not really.
Didn't really care for it. But I said, let's run with it and see what happens. And we were talking yesterday about how much we think it has really enhanced the stories in ways we weren't expecting. And that's the thing about it, is it's that the nature of that creative relationship and working on it together that produces those enhanced elements. So while the idea was mine and Dave was like kind of iffy about it, he's come around to it through the process of us working through it. And there's been unexpected results from it, which is one of my favorite things, is when we're working on something together and we have an idea and it snowballs into different things that we weren't expecting. And that's one of my favorite parts of working the second half. I like working on a second draft of a book a lot more than the first draft, because there's ways to enhance it. And it's always really interesting to look at this whole manuscript and find ways we can enhance it and improve it, and just, be more creative than we might have been in the first time.
So how did each of you individually, I know me and you talked about this a little bit, but how did each of you individually kind of contribute to this? Like, did you have individual roles that were fairly like divide it, you know, like one person maybe would handle this and this, and another person would handle something else, and then you just came together and made sure you put it together. Like when I wrote my book, Eugene was kind of like we were both the ideas guys, but he was more of an ideas guy because like the original like core concept was mine, but so much of it is his brainchild that
Sure.
you know, I ultimately did the writing. Like he would write scenes, and his writing level, he wouldn't be offended if he heard this. Like he that's not his thing. So he would write something for me to just go off of, and then I would rewrite it. But for the most part, he was coming up with ideas in the background, and occasionally writing a scene that I would rewrite. So that was sort of how we worked it out. It played to our strengths individually,
Sure.
because he's like huge sci-fi nerd, like can quote like verbatim from, you know, Battlestar Galactica and Babylon 5 and Stargate and all of this, and then can even give you like the fictional years that things happened in. Like he's like a savant when it comes to this stuff. So I trusted him to come up with decent ideas for a sci-fi novel, and they were, you know, we agreed on them, but the writing ultimately was me. So how did you two divide up the work when it came to writing your novel together?
Well, I got hired as an editor. So it's Mick was doing, you know, the it was his world. I just lived in it. And it was him sending me stuff to either line edit or, you know, just sanity check. And then that kind of evolved into more input to where I couldn't even probably point to exactly what time it became fully mutual.
Yeah.
But there was, it's just at some point in writing this first one, it went from just like me, you know, cleaning up after his maybe sloppy attempts at writing. No, or mistranslations from your own manuscripts.
Sure.
That it was mutual, right? It became, you know, having discussions of it wasn't me asking questions about, you know, why this is in the story and Mick defending it. It was like, well, what is this thing? And it became us having a discussion about it and coming down. And then if we didn't agree off the rip, which was not that common, usually Mick's significant other would arbitrate, and she was usually
yeah,
right.
I remember. You brought up that your wife has you know, like a writing or an English background, and that she was sort of the arbiter whenever there was something that was there's, you know, couldn't come to an agreement over. So
yep.
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, I put most of the words to paper, but that balance has gradually shifted with time and stuff, and it's really been interesting to look at how much that has shifted, and how, like, in the first book, there's not like a specific chapter that Dave wrote. There's chapters that he definitely wrote more words in because they're more militaristic, and we wanted to have that grounded part. I'm like, hey, you come in and just go at this, and then let me know what you've changed, right? But in book 2, there's been multiple chapters. He's like, hey, can I take this one? Let me write this one. And then I go in and I come in as his editor for those chapters. So it just depends on the perspective, the location, what's needed. But while I'm putting most of the words to paper, most decisions about the character and the story are discussed between us. I don't like make major changes without consulting him and getting his approval, or him be like, hey, that's dumb, or hey, that's good, I like that. Nothing about the story as a whole changes without Dave's input. Just the words go to the paper, usually through my typing.
I just get random messages on Discord at 11 o'clock at night. There's like, what if this thing? I'm just like,
what about this?
And there's usually a question mark with a follow-up question. And then I'm like, okay, let's talk about this. Like, that's generally how that's been going. Yeah, I feel a lot more comfortable with the second draft, looking at something and being like, I don't like that. For whatever reason in my mind, I don't like it, and saying like, I'm just gonna do it. Yeah. And then see what you think. And then I'll write something and Mick will be like, or oh no, that's better. Like, so it's less going in and fixing you know, I guess it is still specific areas, but it's larger chunks, right? It's parts of chapters. It's, you know, it's not just like line by line, if that makes sense. So
yeah.
So I want to ask this because we had our way of figuring out how we were gonna like collaborate on these files. So like what do you two do, like, since you're living, you know, a good distance away from each other. You're not there in person with each other. You're doing a lot of this on Discord or over the phone. Like we just made a cloud drive. We used Box, and we had it like kind of neurotically organized into like here's a folder for all the drafts. Here's the one for the background files. Here's the one for all the fake languages we made up for this. Like, you know, we could go in there and you could track what kind of changes were made in case either of us was sort of neglectful to tell the other one what we were working on, because at that time we were at least living in the same time zone, so it wasn't so bad. He was in Florida and I was in New York at the time, so like we were able to talk pretty frequently, but there were always times where one of us would have to do something without the other one being aware. So how did you two like work out a way to actually collaborate on these files? Like, I know there's certain ways you can do it on I was looking at, I don't remember what it was. I feel like it was like Reedsy's book editor or something. You can collaborate. It's like a web-based like word processor and way to export ebooks and stuff like that. So what did you do to kind of stay organized when the two of you are working on this?
So we trained a series of carrier pigeons. That ferried our edits back and forth across the oceon. Yeah.
Nice,
environmentally friendly. Thank you.
The pun with the word ferry.
Thanks.
There. The magic. Yeah, so I have a very long Google Doc, which is an outline. And then each chapter is broken down there. There's a summary of the chapter. There's the song we have picked out for the chapter, because that's one of our practices is we pick a piece of music we feel coordinates well with the chapter or matches the vibe. And then there's whose POV it is. And that each of those links to an individual document. And within that document, we have a highlighting system. So if I add something new after the first round, so the first thing is completely blank of highlights. I send it to him. I give him permission to edit and all that stuff. And then if I add something new into that, I highlight any new or small changes in blue. I highlight things I want to discuss in orange where I'm not sure about. And we just have like little things like if it's green, we're like, ooh, this is good. Let's make sure we keep this, stuff like that. So we have a highlight system where we go back and forth and we unhighlight it once we both looked at it, or re-highlighted it if we want to spend more time going on it. And another thing you can do with Google Documents is you can highlight something and then comment, and a comment pops up on the side and that's saved, and the person gets an email about that and you can resolve it. So we've just used Google Docs for the entire thing because it's cheap, it's free, and we don't put. When some people have like one massive Google Doc with their entire manuscript, I don't do that for organization's sake and the fact that I have 10-year-old laptops and they would die. So it's just, and it's easier to keep it organized. It's like, hey, which chapters you want to have? And I can have 4 or 5 chapters pulled up at once at the top. And we just tab through those as we're talking about it on the weekend. It's like, hey, what chapters we're looking at? All right, let's look at this one. Done. Click over to the next one and so forth.
Yeah. And in the first draft, we made much more liberal use of the like edit function for it, where it was like a line where it like line edits things and it shows the changes you make. And that was really tedious. And so now if it's something simple that I would have otherwise done that, I just fix it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't become it doesn't mean like Mick doesn't have to go back in and look at all my like, oh, there was a period instead of a like all this. It's just, I just fix it now. But at the beginning I was like, well, I'm your editor.
I missed.
Yeah, I'm your editor. I'm going to show you everything that I'm fixing. And now it's like, no, we ain't doing that anymore. But yeah, we use comments if it's something that you need to articulate, or we just highlight it. And then if we go back and fix something later, it's a different color. That way we can quickly jump to different spots and find it. So,
and it's super helpful too as a co-author thing, because you get, if you have a Google Doc open and you're clicked somewhere in the document, you can click on the other person's name and it jumps you right to the section.
Yeah, it jumps you right to their cursor.
So it's really easy to follow each other over long distances and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, like in terms of editing, I feel like co-authoring made it a lot easier for me, at least, to when I actually had to go back and revise things, because you have an extra set of eyes to catch big errors that you might have overlooked on your own. Like I have a tendency, I've gotten better at this, but I would write a draft, and then like if I was working on something on my own, and then would make big changes later on and not remember to change that everywhere. So like I would just miss it. So like I remember once in like one of the stories, the moon is like shattered. It had been destroyed in something, so it was just like largely debris. And then I changed it for it to not be that way, but then I described it as still shattered in another scene without realizing it. So it was really helpful to have another person who could be like what the hell, like you missed this, like we changed this, don't you remember? So like was it, I feel like it was probably a lot easier for you then too, to have an extra
real-time
person.
feedback, and just I don't like like I think it was either earlier today or yesterday, like Mick had changed his paragraph, there was a conversation happening and there was a like vestigial reply to a conversation that wasn't happening anymore, so I was like, what is this? He's like, oh yeah, never mind, and then just delete it. I was like, okay, nice.
So once you finished actually writing it, how did you, like, okay, book's done, you two have edited it, who kind of took over after that point? Like, is one of you kind of more involved when it comes to the actual self-publishing part of it, and any sort of marketing? Like Nick, you're really active on TikTok, and Dave, you are reluctant.
Not so much.
So I feel like I could safely say that Mick handles most of the marketing elements.
He's much more charismatic than me, so it's easier.
Nah. No, I mean, I do all the marketing. I'm trying to get him to do just one video a week if I can, just because more videos is more people seeing it. But yeah, no, I did. So we actually queried for a year. We were in the query trenches, and I did. Did you submit any queries, Dave?
A few.
I asked you. You did.
Not
you
very
actually
many.
submitted a few.
Not very many.
I kept trying to get him to help me with it. But I was already having him do editing while we worked on the second book, so I didn't like pressure him. But I submitted over 100 queries. Awful. Hate it so much. Querying was miserable. And then it was a discussion about whether or not to go indie from that point on. It was like, hey, I would review. He would just get messages, rejection. We got another rejection. We got another rejection. We got a rejection, and it says it's really good and they really like it, but it's not for them. The market's wrong. Blah,
More common than we thought.
Yeah, and he's like, we keep getting the same reasons for the rejection, and it's not that the book's bad. So I was like, as I got more and more tired of it, let's go indie. He became more and more like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, I was really hoping, because every time you see one that's like, this just isn't our normal portfolio. Like, fair enough, right? Mm-hmm. Hey, market tells us this is going to be less successful for whatever reason. Hey, we really like it, but we're full of, and it was never like, and I know it's probably just professional courtesy. No one ever was like, you probably shouldn't do this. Like, no, none of them were like, no, like with nothing, like, so yeah, you guys are going to get laughed out of every other office. Good luck. Like, there was never anyone that was even sort of negative. Yeah. And I know they can't be super mean to you, but like, we were like, well, if they're not telling us, it's never call them again. Like, then
feedback is rare with queries, but what feedback we did get was always positive.
That's good. I feel like that can kind of encourage you to feel a little bit more confident when you are going to go indie with it. So, and I understand, like, at least on Dave's part, the reluctance to maybe go that route, just because, like, there is sort of, unfortunately, I feel like there can be sort of a stigma around it, where people look at that as like, oh, this must mean that you were like not good enough to get a publisher, right?
Yeah.
So which I thankfully seems to be changing.
There's a shift because there's a voice for indie authors now that hasn't existed previously, and there's more resources available, and there's a ton of people trying to take advantage of them. But the market shifting with like things like Ingram Spark and Amazon, you have the ability to produce these things, and you see things of varying quality and stuff. And I've been only reading indie this year, and a lot of the indie books I've read have been better than any classic or any traditionally published stuff I've read. But also, there's some indie stuff that I've read where I'm like, yep, that's embarrassing. Like, you shouldn't have published this. That's rare and far between, and I'm not going to like call anyone out specifically, but that is the nature of it. But at the same time, it's like that with traditionally published books too. Mm-hmm. There's books I wouldn't leave in my bathroom that are traditionally published, that indie books are just way and beyond better. So it's a matter of who controls the market, and that market control is shifting. Yeah. And so I've had way more interaction, and I've sold more books probably to indie authors than I have most other people, and that's a really fun collaborative element of this that I've really enjoyed. Like, I have a bunch of authors who I've been getting to make Discords for their books, so that I can go in and I can message them chapter by chapter and get those reactions and interactions. And that's been so much fun. And that's something I don't think I would have ever been able to do if we were all traditional.
Yeah. I don't want to make it a class thing, but like I've seen, how many times have you seen a mediocre celebrity with a best-selling book and you're like, how did this happen? And you're like, oh, they just bought 50 million. Oh, that's how it, right? So I hopefully don't read very many of those, but I've been tricked before of like, oh, this guy wrote a book, and then being like, wow, no, it didn't. This is terrible. And yeah, to Mick's point, yeah, I'm pretty leery about a lot of social media stuff, due to my job, and I have been very surprised.
I didn't even think about that. That like, yeah, you have like kind of limitations on what you can really say.
Right, not for long. And that's good. Yeah, not for long. And what makes it has been my experience. I was very surprised to see how the community that he fell into is very supportive and accepting, and it's the exact opposite of what I expected, like a cesspit of, people on a, random social media app. Like, no, legit, like these people are responsive and really cool, and they want to show their stuff, but they also want to help other people with their craft. Like, I was really surprised.
I was in a similar situation to you because I did not want to go on TikTok. I just knew that it was big, and I had kind of I didn't have a great opinion of it before I went on there. And I was expecting it, like, just like you said, a cesspool. This is what I thought it was going to be. And then the more I actually, like, now I'm actually interacting with people. Before I was just kind of posting and not even really talking to anyone. But I'm like, oh, this is like a actually very supportive group of people, which, I can get competitive. I can be kind of bitter and stuff too. Like I thought that it would be more people who like they didn't like that there were other people basically like competing for a reader's attention. So I thought it would be a little bit less supportive in that way. But no, I guess as indie authors, you feel like you kind of have to stick together in a way, because you always feel a little bit either like outsized by all of these big publishing companies, or kind of disregarded by readers who might be like, oh well, if they didn't go through a publisher, that means that the publishers that they did reach out to didn't like it, and therefore this book must be shit. So it's like you kind of have to stick together, and I'm glad that it is sort of shifting away from a stigmatized kind of thing, and if anything, it seems to be doing really well, and it's like that in more than just writing. Like other industries too seem like it's like, you were saying, like these big, you'll see like a big book, one that's been like traditionally published and is like huge and a bestseller or whatever, and it's actually crap. Like I feel that way about even just movies, especially horror movies. Like the indie horror movies seem to be so much better at
there's passion.
Like there's so much better than the ones that are coming out that are just so commercialized and just kind of like cut and paste standard.
Yeah, what are they on 6 Conjuring movies now?
Yeah,
like come on, man.
There's a lot of them. I have my opinion on Ed and Lorraine Warren, the real one.
Yeah, I do as well, and I will say it is not positive. That could be a fun other discussion if you'd like to have that offline.
So it's just, like it's great to actually meet people who are supporting each other and understanding that if someone is a reader, they're going to read more than one book. They're not going to be just reading yours. So so you don't have to be so cutthroat about things and act like, oh well, if I support them, then this reader's not going to read mine. No, they can read more than one. Like that's how it goes.
Yeah. I've got a number of books, and I'm like on a book buying ban because I want to actually catch up on my TBR. But I have a number of books that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. I've gotten books just because I liked the person who was like, I'm like, I don't know anything about your book, but I like your vibe, so let me grab your book and help support another creator. Because that's just fun. And I've been shocked and surprised and thrilled by the experience. And lift each other up, back each other up. It's so easy. Like even this is an example of that, because if we collaborate, we're potentially doubling, if not more, expanding our audience. And I've never ever met a reader who's like, "There's too many books out there."
Yeah, I know, right? Like this never happened.
No one says that.
So, I want to ask you a couple of like more practical things before we wrap up. So I was thinking about this because I put a video out not super long ago about getting like ISBNs for a book.
Mm.
So I know you can either buy one yourself, which is what I did, but I just happened to have money to burn at that time.
Sure.
And then because they're expensive as hell. And then there's you could get like a free assigned one
Yeah.
from whoever's printing it on demand for you. So which
Right.
which way did you decide to go? Because that's gonna open up a question after, depending on how you answer this.
Yeah. So I've gone both ways.
Okay.
I've got for Paragon Exordium, I purchased the
Got him.
ISBN, and then for Manly Motivations, I did not purchase the ISBN.
Okay. So for the ones that the one that you did purchase, when you're setting up the ISBN and actually registering your book, like how did you go about listing yourselves as contributors? Like you can
Yeah.
select multiple functions for them. So I
Yeah.
don't know if you put author or editor or
So
both.
for Paragon Exordium, I put author for myself and David as editor.
Okay.
And then for
Which was
Paragon
accurate.
Attrition, for Paragon Attrition, it will be author and co-author.
Okay, cool. So then I guess on Amazon it'll say co-author on there.
Yeah, unless Dave just wants to just use the moniker, because the thing with Mikel Melwasul, and we should have discussed this more up front. I made the name Mikel Melwasul. It's an author pen name because it was supposed to be.
Yeah, I realized
originally
about halfway through the interview when you said the last name was a reference to something, and I was like, oh, okay, then it's a pen name. I didn't realize it first.
Yeah, I wanted something more unique. I wanted something with alliteration. It's a Tolkien. It's got some Tolkien references to it. It was supposed to represent how it was a collaborative work, So if Dave wants Melwasul to be, he is part of Melwasul, that's fine. But if he wants a separate credit, that's fine. That's something we haven't even discussed at this point for book 2. But as I've been on TikTok, it's taken on more of a different persona than originally intended. Because I'm out there making videos and now I have my personality and stuff attached to it. So there's people who just know me as Melwasul, and that's the identity I have. So it's a little different. So that's something we'll discuss when we get to book 2. There's changes and shifts from that. Like book 2, I'm going to ask David to write the dedication for it, or at least part of it, whereas I wrote the full dedication for book 1. So we'll either split it or collaborate on it and stuff like that. So it's a learning experience as his role changes and shifts.
Yeah, from a purely practical side of it, I have in the last month explained this to a couple of different people, and explaining what a co-author is makes people's brains hurt. But explaining that it's a pseudonym, they're like, oh, okay. Like it, so maybe for, you know what I mean? And this isn't, that's just an experience I had literally in the last month, was like, what is this Melwasul? I was like, it's a pseudonym. And they're like, oh, cool. Can I buy it? Like that happened, and trying to say like, well, I wrote it with this person, and they're like, so you're not the author. I'm like, well, that's not fair. So it's easier to say that it is a pseudonym for some people, and I don't know, they were older than me, so I don't know. I'm not trying to make a value judgment about age, but like back in a place where
happened to me though, where like you say you co-authored a novel, and they're like, well, which one of you wrote it? And I'm like,
right.
Me? Like
the advice I would have is whoever you're talking to, and if you have pride about this, you're doing this wrong. But if you're talking to someone, you wrote it.
Yes,
if Dave's talking to someone, Dave wrote it. I don't care about the credit I'm getting, because that makes them far more likely to pick it up.
Yeah, because like it's not like I get mad if Eugene says he wrote a novel, well, even though it's my words. Like I'm like, no, you did.
Yeah, and I leave. Yeah, right now I have a copy of Paragon Exordium on my desk on purpose, because people come in and ask me about it, and I say I wrote it.
Nice.
Because I'll just flip the cover and it says the suit. It says that, and then it has my name underneath it. So if I open it and they see it's my name, they're like, "Oh, well, shit, I'll buy it." Like,
there it is.
Then thanks. I mean, like.
So when is I don't know if you could predict this. When are you thinking the second one will come out?
We're hoping Attrition releases next year.
Oh, okay. I mean, what quarter?
What quarter next year?
You don't have to get specific.
Fourth quarter.
I don't know how
Fourth
long
quarter
into it you are.
Because we just finished. We're 50% of the way through the second draft of book 2. That's huge. We have We knocked out 2 POVs literally before this meeting. Like 30 minutes before this, we were cranking out and finishing.
We told ourselves that it was going to be done by June, and we rode that to the end.
Yeah. So we want to knock out the other 2 perspectives and get it to beta readers, who I'm going to keep the beta reader group small. I have a much easier time selecting that now that I have a reading audience because of the first one. So I think that experience will go faster. The first one, it took like 4 months for us to get enough feedback from beta readers to get anywhere. I think we'll easily get the feedback we need in a month. And I'm going to only have like 5 people and have some authors involved in the beta reading process. So if we can do that in January and then start working on revisions come February of next year, and then start like once we pass it off to beta readers, I'll already be reaching out to an artist, hopefully.
Yeah. I was about to say doing it the first time, I think definitely a lot of this skill set from doing it once already is going to make it a lot quicker. Like we got a line editor, and that didn't really go all that well, and it certainly wasn't fast, right? Yeah. Like it was not the expedient thing to do. So like, all right, we're going to do something different. Like, yeah, for the art, like it took a lot longer than we probably should have. I mean, we should have known, but it took longer to produce, and it's beautiful, right? But it's all things that can be started at the same time that we kind of did in sequence, and it just dragged it out even further. So
hopefully end of next year, and maybe we'll get the audiobook out at the same time as the original. The actual, I think that would be better. But
I'm feeling ambitious. I think next year is just when in next year is it going to be?
Yeah, 2025 is your year. So I'm excited to see how that turns out and see if you do get an audiobook out, because I'm envious of that, because I would love to do that.
So Exordium's audiobook releases next month.
So could we talk about that a little bit? Because this will be a learning thing for me. So absolutely. I haven't done a ton of research into that. I took like a cursory look at Amazon's like audiobook version of like KDP, which the name of it is escaping me
ACX.
Right now. That's it. So I know you can go and either you can like hire someone as the narrator, or you could upload your own the audio files if you decide to narrate it yourself as the author. And then if you do decide to hire someone for it, I think there's different arrangements you can make for how they're compensated. So can you just describe what that process is like to me, who knows very little about this, and then to people who are watching?
Yeah, I mean, the first decision is going to, of course, be, do you want to record it yourself, or do you want to hire someone out to do it? And my decision was pretty easily, I don't have time to record it myself as much as I would love to. I also hate reading my own work. That's been a different experience going back through it. And once it's done, I'm actually enjoying it, which has been really just a blessing. But you have a couple options if you decide to go with a narrator. You can do pay up front and just pay their fees. You can do royalty share, where you will split the royalties. I think it's a 50-50 split on the royalties. Or you can do a sort of a combined version of the two of them, where you pay a fee up front and then you get more of the royalties than they do. And so you write up some scripts and some auditioning information, and it's like, hey, here's these characters, here's how I want it to sound, and you release it, and you can have it out for however long you want, and you'll get auditions on there, and people will look it up based on the genres and all that stuff, or videos you make on TikTok to spread awareness as well. Because I'm friends with a lot of narrators on here, which has been a really unique experience. There's a ton of voice actors and narrators that are pairing up with the indie author audience and becoming like these teams, and it's really neat. So
I think it's mutually beneficial, right? Yeah. And the reason, and I mean, not to off how many people you looked at and stuff, like we ended up doing like the royalty share because our goal is the more people that listen to it, the better. So like making the money back, like, yeah, great. But the more people that at this point still get to hear it, and the amount of people that have told us, I either don't have time or am not inclined to read, but I can't listen, is really high. So we're just trying to get, so like it was easier that way.
So how long does it take to actually find someone who can narrate it if you're doing it through ACX and opening it up to people to do audition?
I think that's going to depend entirely on the author and a couple of factors. I think one of the big factors is which type of financing you're going to go with. It's a lot easier to get finance. It's a lot easier to get auditions if you're willing to pay up front. right? Because it's less of a risk to the author, especially if your book isn't 700 pages of insanity, which is not. It's fun, it's easy to read, but it's massive. This is a huge undertaking. This is going to be like a 40-hour audiobook. That's a lot of work to do for not necessarily, like, not a guaranteed payout, right?
Yeah.
So you have to pitch yourself to these narrators to make it worthwhile, or have the resources to pay someone up front. Then it's a question of going through with these auditions and distinguishing and finding what you like, and figure out the things. Listen to other audiobooks would be my advice. Find things that you know, like, hey, I heard this, I don't like this. Because if you don't enjoy your audiobook, your audience isn't going to enjoy your audiobook, right? So I am very much enjoying my audiobook. I think we left auditions open for a month.
Yeah, it was
just
a
because
good
I
amount
wanted
of
to make
time.
sure we got a good thing. And we had like 40 auditions.
Oh wow.
We had a lot of auditions, and apparently there were other people that I missed that just hadn't gotten around to it. So the guy we ended up going with, Cormac. Cormac he's a young Irish guy. He's been in voice acting for, I think, 8 years, but he's never done an audiobook before. So he submitted, and they can send a message to you with some extra details and stuff, and they submit. But he's like, "Hey, I was on my way out the door. I saw your thing. I'm very excited to apply. I really like the story description." And he just had all these. I had 4 different characters I wanted in the audition, which is a lot. I was also considering splitting it between 2 narrators, a male and a female one, but that's a whole another level of hassle. And Cormac's was one of the only voices with a female voice by a male performer. Didn't make me cringe. Some of them were fine, but Cormac's especially, I was like, ooh, okay, that actually sounds really good. And so he doesn't have like a TikTok or anything. I'm trying to get him to make one because of the extensive like value of that comes with it, and he'll be very successful in here without a problem. But yeah, he auditioned, and he was fantastic, and he was very excited for the project. And I had to kind of pitch it to him a little bit too, because he's like, hey, do you think this is going anywhere? I genuinely do. At that point, we only had like 30 reviews. So it was like, this has all been just word of mouth. We haven't paid anything out of pocket extra. I think it will go somewhere. It might take the series being completed for it to really get out there, but it's been well received. You can go read reviews, and here's the link to all of that. Here's the ebook for free to read it if you have faith in it. And he came around, he's like, I'm in, let's do this. So he's never done an audiobook before, but this dude he's going places with the crazy things he's been doing in this. It's so fascinating.
This is awesome. Like, this is definitely something I'd like to explore at some point. But like, yeah, what you're saying about when a male author does when a male narrator does a female voice, it can be kind of cringy. Like, I've heard ones that are fantastic where it was like just enough of a change in voice to indicate that it was a different character and a character of another gender, but not so much where it was like they suddenly switch and they're like, oh, and then so and so said, and like, it's just,
and different people are going to have different levels of
concern.
tolerance for that, right? And so that's something I did with my Discord, was I sent them samples from some of the auditions I had. I was like, hey, what do you guys think of this? Do you like this? Do you not like this? So I had other perspectives and stuff. So it wasn't just what I liked. Having a sounding board and having people you can interact with helps a lot.
Yeah, that was
there was one
why I never decided to do it myself when I had the time at one point to maybe do it. I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to pull that off. It's going to sound terrible.
Yeah, what I think sold both of us was he did one of the basilisk.
Yeah.
And it's just the I don't know. He was able to convey, because it's a non-human, character that shows up that's a super evil, right? And it's just bent on destruction. It's like, but he was able to convey that, just the
power in the voice.
Yeah, power isn't even a strong enough word. I was looking for something just like that. This is an ancient being of immense power and confidence, and the way that it came through was just like, okay, this person's range, no matter what we throw at him, it'll be fine. And that sold me. I think it's what got Mick to.
Yeah, and I mean, we got that after we'd already hired him.
Yeah.
Like he's asked permission to experiment with stuff, which has been really neat. He really considers this an art. So he's using like voice effects and stuff. So I'll be like, okay, let me listen to this. And a character I have been waiting to hear the voice of comes in, and they have like this effect that he just did some audio editing on it. It's like, whoa, that is transformative. That's so cool. And I just didn't expect it. And it's really, really fascinating. And he's very talented. So hopefully he'll get on here eventually, and he'll start doing interviews and stuff. Cause like I said, Cormac's going places.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Well,
think it'd be an
wanna thank-
asset.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
He's
for
gonna be an
sure.
asset.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you both for coming on here. We're kind of short on time now, but
Sorry.
it was fun to get like co-authors' perspectives on things, and to talk to people who can kind of relate to what I had done. And then
Sure.
hopefully, if there's any people out there who are watching this who thought about maybe writing something with a friend, it can be done. I don't always I don't always recommend that people go into like business with, friends or family. It can
Yeah.
make things weird, but I feel like when it comes to writing and all that, like it's just fun to do it together. And
Yeah.
you can really build up your friendship a lot with it. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, thank you both for being here. I recommend that everyone go check out Paragon Exordium, which is available on Amazon, and there it is. There's a beautiful cover for Paragon Exordium. So anyone who's interested in urban fantasy or just fantasy in general, I think is going to really like this. And the authors are really cool guys. So
Thank you.
support them, please. If anyone is interested in appearing on this channel be interviewed as an indie author, please feel free to send me an email at roughrider@protonmail.com. And until next time, thank you all. God bless you all.